I'll tell you, I've been to the border. I've been to the Biden cages. For 4 years, Democrats went on and on and on. The corrupt corporate media went on and on and on about kids in cages. You couldn't turn on the evening news without hearing kids in cages. What they didn't tell you is Barack Obama built those cages, and today under Joe Biden, the cages are bigger and they're more full than they were before. Mr. President, every Democrat who stood up and lamented kids in cages in the House of Representatives, Representative Ocatio Cortez has a famous photo of her grasping her head by the kids in cages. Well, I'm going to give a simple challenge for Representative Ocatio Cortez and for every Democrat in this body. Go see the Biden cages with your own eyes. I've seen them, the Donna tent facility with over 4,000 people, with little boys and little girls on top of each other. Just a couple of weeks ago when I was in the Rio Grande Valley, the rate of COVID positivity in the Biden cages was over 22%. And all the Democrats who talked about this, if they don't go, if they don't denounce the Biden cages, then they're telling you that they're hypocrites, that they didn't believe it when they said it, that they didn't care about it when they said it, that it was all politics. It wasn't about their kids. Why does Joe Biden refuse to go to the Rio Grande Valley? Because if he goes, the TV cameras will come with him. Why does Kamala Harris, who's supposed to be the border czar, she's supposed to be in charge of this, why won't she go to the Rio Grande Valley? Because if she went, the TV cameras would come and would show the Biden cages. And the Democrats are counting on the corrupt corporate media to suddenly say, nothing to see here. 15,000 Haitians under a bridge in Del Rio, nothing to see here. Anyone want to know what Joe Biden's favorite ice cream flavor is? That's the news. Never mind 1.2 million illegal immigrants. Never mind when I took 19 senators down to the border, we went out on the river and saw a man floating dead in the river who died trying to cross illegally. Never mind the South Texas farmers and ranchers, the moms who told me, I won't let my teenage kids go out on our ranch without being armed with a loaded firearm. Because there's so many human traffickers and narcotics traffickers that it's dangerous for them to go out on their own ranch. Never mind the South Texas farmers and ranchers who told me at round tables how tired they are of going out and finding dead bodies. You want to understand what's happening? Say there's no crisis? Come to Brooks County. I invite every Democrat here to Brooks County. Brooks County in South Texas. It's just north of the border. Brooks County, over and over and over again, they're dead bodies of illegal immigrants. The traffickers who are bringing them in, they're not nice guys. They're not humanitarians. They don't give a damn. That means if one of the illegal immigrants is a pregnant woman, is a young child, is elderly, is sick, they just abandon them. They leave them in the rough terrain, in the summer heat, and over again. The farmers and ranchers encounter dead bodies on their property where the traffickers have abandoned them. Mr. President, I ask you, is that humane? Is that compassionate, the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris policy that encourages, that puts people in harm's way and results in people dying? When we were down on the border, we saw a young girl who had been gang raped by the human traffickers who had brought her to America. The rate of sexual assault is staggering, particularly among the girls and young women. So much so that a significant percentage of young women, before they take the harrowing trip with the traffickers, will implant a birth control because they know the odds of their being sexually assaulted are so great. And I'll tell you, as I was doing the roundtables, one of the things I saw also was the colored wristbands. So the traffickers are global cartels. They're criminals. They're vicious criminals. They charge anyone, a young man, a young woman, a little boy, a little girl, thousands of dollars, anywhere from $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 to cross into the United States. By the way, do you know there's 100% operational control on the border? 100% on the southern side. Nobody crosses the border without the cartel's permission. If you do, they will kill you. Every person who crosses the border does so after paying the cartels, because you will be killed otherwise. But often when they come, they'll cross and they'll end up at a stash house. I've been to those stash houses. I've been out on the midnight patrols with the Border Patrol. You go into those stash houses, and they're colored wristbands that they put on the illegal immigrants. And the colors correspond to how many thousands of dollars they paid and how many thousands of dollars more they owe. Often when they get here, the cartels will say, "Thank you for your X thousand dollars. We want Y thousand more." Tragically, it is at those stash houses in the United States where many of the sexual assaults occur. And so these immigrants, many of whom are young children, teenage children, when they get here, the Biden administration delivers them to their final destination. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and their administration are the last mile of the human trafficking network. But for the 14, 15-year-old boy who arrives in Atlanta, who arrives in New York, who arrives in Detroit, who arrives in Nashville, many of those 14 and 15-year-old boys owe thousands of dollars to the cartels, which means they arrive in your city. You might think Georgia is not a border state, but when teenagers are arriving in Atlanta, owing thousands of dollars to the cartels, they work for the cartels. And the cartels know who their family is and where their family is, and they risk their mother or father being murdered if they don't work for the cartels to pay off the cartels. The young women have it even worse. There are teenage girls who make the decision, I want to come to America, I want to come to the promised land. We've been a beacon of hope to millions throughout our history. They don't realize they are stepping into hell on earth. When the traffickers take them and then take them to a cartel facility in whatever city they end up in, where many of those teenage girls, still owing thousands of dollars to the cartels, have to work to pay off that debt by forced prostitution. Young girls forced into a life of sex slavery because the alternative is murder at the hand of the cartels. This is happening. The fact that Joe Biden doesn't want to talk about it, the fact that Kamala Harris claims it's not happening, the fact that the corrupt corporate media ignores it, it doesn't stop the fact that hundreds of thousands of people are suffering.
The gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Presley, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Over here. Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Carson and I have waited a long time for this moment, but the residents of my district, the 7th Congressional in Massachusetts, have been waiting far longer for your agency to do its job. Colleagues across the aisle earlier were critical of the passion and even the outrage that we've expressed on this side of the aisle. I'd make no apologies for that. This matter is very, very personal. Let me be clear, housing is a fundamental human right, and the displacement of families should be regarded as the public health crisis that it is. Mr. Secretary, your pioneering work in pediatric neurology is historic, and it is something to be commended. And so it pains me that your gifted hands and mind are doing the bidding and carrying the water of what I believe to be one of the most morally bankrupt presidents in our nation's history, increasing rents, evicting families. You mentioned that the operating room was a safe haven away from all the troubles of the world. Safe haven. That's exactly what a home should be and what every single person, and in particular our children, deserve. Today, you are not here as a doctor or even as our Surgeon General, which I think might be better suited for your talents, but as the official tasked with leading the agency overseeing our nation's crumbling housing stock. And for that, I do believe you are unqualified. You said this was not a political matter, but it does seem that political views are being played out in the policies that are being rolled out every single day. When you imply that people are living in public housing either because of a desire to be self-sufficient, questioning a work ethic, when we are eliminating a stock but not increasing supply, people in the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District would have to work 84 hours to afford a decent one-bedroom at fair market rent. Doris Bunty, who's a former Massachusetts state representative in my district and was the first African-American woman to hold the position of head of BHA, the first public housing tenant to lead a public housing agency in a major city. She said, being poor is not a character flaw. I agree. But again, given your medical background, perhaps you could weigh in on the health consequences of failing to invest in safe housing. Mr. Secretary, since I am short on time here, yes or no, is stable and safe housing a social determinant of health?
Sounds like you have not been here and heard most of my testimony.
Please just answer the question, reclaiming my time. Yes or no, is stable and safe housing a social determinant of health?
There is no question that housing is an important part of health.
Yes or no?
No question that it's a part of health.
It is well documented that health problems such as lead poisoning, asthma, and injuries from trips and falls, especially amongst our senior population, can be linked to substandard housing conditions. Combined, these conditions result in billions a year in healthcare costs. Many of those most at risk of developing these conditions reside in public and federally assisted housing. Yes or no? If left unaddressed, do you believe the substandard public housing conditions pose a risk to tenants' physical, mental, and emotional health? If left unaddressed.
Yes or no? Can you ask me some questions yourself?
You don't get to dictate what my line of questioning is, reclaiming my time. You're a very smart man, so you understand the question. Please answer it. Yes or no, if left unaddressed, which I believe they are unaddressed because this budget does not reflect the need, do you believe the substandard public housing conditions pose a risk to tenants' physical, mental, and emotional health?
You already know the answer to that.
Yes or no?
You know the answer.
Yes or no? I know the answer. Do you know the answer? Yes or no?
Reclaiming my time.
You don't get to do that.
Oh.
The time belongs to the gentlelady.
The evidence is clear that if we do not invest the necessary funds today, we will pay the price in people's health tomorrow. And what is this administration's response? Cuts. Cuts to crucial funding like the Public Housing Operating Fund and the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, Section 202 housing for elderly and Section 811, housing for persons with disabilities, and even the complete elimination of the Public Housing Capital Fund. These policies are devoid of empathy and humanity, and you've been talking in the abstract, but I want to get specific. There's a Miss Northcross, a mother and a grandmother living in Brighton in my district. She's raised her children and now cares for her grandchildren in property with thick mold on the walls. Her son was recently hospitalized, look at the pictures here, because of bone tumors in his arm and leg. He needs surgery to save and improve his quality of life, but he won't get it because the family must have a sanitary, stable housing condition first. Their actual home literally poses a risk of post-op injury and infection. Her question to you is, what do they become? When you raise children in these conditions, what can they become? So yes or no? Do Ms. Norcross and her family deserve to live in these conditions because they are poor?
If you've listened to any...
Yes or no, do they deserve to live in these conditions because they are poor?
You know very well...
Would you let your grandmother live in public housing?
You know very well...
Would you let your grandmother live in public housing, yes or no?
You know very well...
Under your watch and at your helm, would you allow your grandmother to live in public housing under these conditions?
It would be very nice if you would stop...
You stated that
the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Lawson, is recognized for 5 minutes. The gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Ocatio Cortez, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you, Secretary Carson, for joining us today. Secretary Carson, in December 2017, you delivered a keynote at the Manhattan Institute